Hi there, and welcome to this week's workshop. This week, we're exploring something that can be both surprising and deeply validating: how processed foods can actually mimic the feeling of stress and even make it worse. If you've ever turned to something you thought would help you calm down, only to find yourself feeling more tense, more anxious, or more foggy afterward, you're not imagining it. This wasn't a personal failure, it was chemistry. Understanding this part of recovery can change everything, because when you know how your brain and body are reacting to these foods, you can stop blaming yourself and start using tools that truly support your well-being. So today we're going to explore how your brain's stress and addiction systems are linked, why certain foods cause artificial anxiety, how food marketers are deliberately tapping into your emotions to drive sales, and what it really means to create calm from the inside out. Let's begin with what's happening biologically, starting with your internal stress alarm system. At the heart of emotional eating is something called the HPA axis, short for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is your brain's built-in stress response system. You can think of it like an internal alarm system that's always on standby, ready to help you react to threats. Here's how it works. Step 1, threat detection. When something feels stressful, maybe someone speaks to you sharply or plans change unexpectedly, your brain's hypothalamus picks up on it. This part of your brain acts like a command center. Step 2, hormonal activation. The hypothalamus sends a chemical signal called CRF, corticotropin releasing factor, to activate the rest of the stress system. And then step 3, stress hormone release. CRF tells your pituitary gland and adrenal glands to get moving. The adrenal glands then release adrenaline and cortisol, your body's main stress hormones. In a real emergency, this system helps you survive. But here's the thing: processed food can trigger this same system, even when you're safe, even when there's no actual threat. Why? Because certain ingredients stimulate the stress pathway in your brain, flooding it with chemicals that make your body act like something's wrong, even if nothing is. So what does that feel like? When your HPA axis is being artificially activated by food, you might notice some things like feeling jittery or wired, being on edge, even if you can't say why, having that restless energy that says something's off, even when there's no crisis. And this isn't just what people call a sugar crash. This is your nervous system responding to a neurochemical event that mimics real stress, even when the stress isn't actually coming from your life circumstances. Your body is doing exactly what it's wired to do. It just got hijacked. Let's slow down for a moment and get curious about your experience. Think back to a moment when you ate something you thought would calm you down. What did your body feel like 10 to 30 minutes afterwards? Did you notice any urgency, racing thoughts, a tight feeling in your chest? There's no need to judge or analyze it, just notice. These are the patterns we're learning to recognize together. This is just the beginning of the story. Now that we've explored how stress gets activated in the brain, we're going to move into how processed foods hijack your reward system, keeping that stress response stuck in overdrive. Let's get going. Now that you understand how your brain system works, let's talk about something that can feel even more personal. Why certain processed foods feel comforting in the moment, but actually make things worse. Processed foods aren't just appealing because they taste good. They're chemically designed to change your brain chemistry, to mimic calm, to soothe pain, and to replace emotional regulation with a fast, artificial fix. That's not just a side effect, that's the goal. These foods are engineered to hijack your stress and reward systems, keeping you locked in a cycle of craving, temporary relief, and more craving. Let's walk through exactly how different processed ingredients affect your brain and body. Let's start with flour and sugar. These ingredients are absorbed incredibly quickly into your bloodstream. When that happens, your brain gets a burst of dopamine, your main reward chemical. You also get a temporary boost in serotonin, the neurotransmitter that helps with mood and emotional stability. And for a moment, it can really feel like relief. But here's what happens next. That high fades fast. And as your blood sugar crashes, your brain starts to panic. It sees the crash as a threat, activating the stress system all over again. This is what we call the reward crash cycle. It tricks your brain into thinking that processed food is the solution when really it's the cause of the chaos. The result is a constant flip-flop between momentary relief and emergency mode. Next, let's look at dairy and gluten. These aren't just comfort foods in the emotional sense. They literally produce chemicals that make your brain feel soothed and numb. When you digest dairy or gluten, some of the proteins break down into casomorphins and gluteomorphins. These are compounds that bind to opiate receptors in the brain, the same receptors that respond to pain medications. So when you're feeling overwhelmed or emotionally raw, these foods can bring a wave of artificial calm. Your brain learns this pattern fast. The more often you reach for these foods in moments of discomfort, the more your brain comes to expect them as the solution. Salt isn't just salty. In excess, it can also stimulate the brain's opiate symptom, creating a subtle sense of safety and emotional grounding. It's easy to mistake this for comfort or satisfaction, but it's really a chemical signal, not an actual resolution for your stress. And like others, it becomes self-reinforcing. The more you use salt to feel safe, the more your brain starts to rely on it, not for taste, but for regulation. Now let's talk about processed fats. Certain types of fat, especially when combined with sugar and salt, stimulate the release of endocannabinoids in your brain. These are the same chemicals that get activated by cannabis. So if you ever felt like a certain snack gave you a sense of calm or helped you check out, that wasn't your imagination. Your brain was producing a chemical escape. But over time, just like with other substances, your brain becomes desensitized. That means you need more of the same food to get the same sense of comfort. This is what we call tolerance, and it's one of the earliest warning signs of dependence. And then there's caffeine. This one is tricky because it often feels like the thing that helps us get through the day, but it's important to understand how it impacts the stress system. Caffeine works in two main ways. It blocks adenosine, a chemical that normally helps you feel sleepy, so you stay alert even when your body's asking for rest. And it increases dopamine and triggers adrenaline, giving you a temporary high that often feels like focus or motivation. But after that temporary high fades, your system crashes hard. You might feel exhausted, irritable, anxious, or foggy. And then what happens? You reach for more caffeine, and the cycle repeats. This is how something that feels like a productivity booster can quietly push your nervous system into long-term instability. Now, imagine all of those effects happening at once. Because in most ultra-processed foods, these ingredients are combined intentionally. You're not just getting sugar, you're getting sugar, salt, processed fat, gluten, dairy, caffeine, and artificial flavors all in the same bite. Your brain is being flooded with dopamine for reward, serotonin for comfort, opioids for numbing, endocannabinoids for calm, adrenaline for stimulation. This cocktail creates a neurochemical storm that keeps your stress system activated and keeps you coming back for more. And remember, none of this is a mistake. These effects were engineered. They're working exactly as designed. Let's take a moment to pause and reflect. When your stress feels highest, what do you reach for? Is there a certain food you turn to when you're anxious or overwhelmed? What feeling are you hoping it will give you? Calm, energy, escape, relief? This isn't about changing anything yet. It's just about noticing, because awareness is the first step in breaking the cycle. You're doing incredibly important work by learning this. You're not just understanding what's happening, you're reclaiming your ability to respond with clarity and compassion. In the next section of the video, we're going to explore how this cycle of artificial comfort leads to a deeper pattern of anxiety and withdrawal, and how we begin to break that loop. Let's talk about what happens after your brain has been flooded with those reward chemicals from processed food. You crash. And that crash isn't just about feeling tired or low energy. It can feel almost identical to real stress, panic, or anxiety, even if nothing in your life is actually going wrong at the moment. This is what we call artificial anxiety. And it's one of the most powerful and confusing parts of what people call emotional eating. When your brain stress system gets activated again and again by processed food, your body eventually starts to produce anxiety on its own without any external trigger at all. You might feel a racing heart or tightness in your chest, restless or agitated like you're on edge, irritable, foggy, or emotionally unsteady, a sudden urgency like you need to do something immediately, even if you don't know what. And here's the key. These feelings aren't coming from your thoughts or your environment. They're coming from a chemical rebound after the stimulation wears off. Your brain has been activated and now it's crashing. So even when your day is going fine, your body might still be reacting like something's wrong because chemically it feels like it is. Now, what happens when you try to stop eating the foods that were giving you those temporary moments of comfort or stimulation? Withdrawal. And it's real. When your brain and body have come to rely on certain foods to regulate your emotions or your energy, taking them away creates a kind of internal panic. You may experience headaches or body aches, fatigue or trouble sleeping, emotional flatness or low mood, cravings that don't just whisper, they shout. That's not weakness, though. That's chemistry in motion. Your nervous system is trying to rebalance without the artificial support it got used to. It's working hard to recalibrate, and that can feel physically and emotionally uncomfortable at first. But it's not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that your body is healing. So here's the trap that so many people fall into without realizing it. You eat something processed to feel better. For a short time, it helps, and you feel numbed out or you feel energized. Then you crash. Anxiety or fatigue set in. Your brain interprets that crash as a problem and thinks the solution is more food. So you eat again, not because you're hungry, but to escape the withdrawal. This creates what we call a self-reinforcing loop. Each round strengthens the belief that processed food is necessary to regulate your mood. But what it's really doing is keeping your stress system activated and keeping your recovery out of reach. Let's take a moment to explore this in your own life. Think about one moment this week when you used food to cope with stress. What did you feel like before eating? What did you feel like 20 to 30 minutes later? What about 2 hours later when the effects wore off? Can you spot a pattern? Did the relief turn into discomfort later? Did that discomfort create more cravings for you? What you're seeing there isn't a character flaw. It's your nervous system trying to find stability in a system that's been chemically destabilized. This awareness is very powerful because once you see the loop, you can start to step out of it with support, with compassion, and with new skills. In the next section, we're going to talk about the food industry's role in all of this and how they've deliberately engineered not just the ingredients, but the emotional experiences that keep us reaching for relief in the wrong places. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding the system so you can stop blaming yourself. Let's keep going. By now, we've looked at how processed foods can chemically mimic stress and create false relief in the brain. But there's another layer to this cycle that's just as powerful, and it doesn't start in your kitchen. It starts in a boardroom. Today, we're going to talk about something that most people never learn, how your emotions are being deliberately triggered, manipulated, and reinforced by the food industry. This isn't about willpower. It's not even just about ingredients. It's about emotional engineering. And the more you understand it, the more clearly you can step out of the cycle. Let's start with something called the bliss point. Scientists working in food labs spend years perfecting the exact combination of sugar, fat, and salt that light up your brain's reward centers. When a food hits that bliss point, your brain releases a flood of dopamine, your primary pleasure chemical. And that feels good, really good, so good, in fact, that your brain remembers it. It learns to crave that exact combination, not because you're hungry, but because the chemical response created such a strong imprint. Over time, your brain begins to expect that level of intensity. So when you try to eat something more natural, more subtle, like a whole food, it feels boring, unsatisfying, like it's missing something. It's not that you don't like healthy food. It's that your brain has been retrained. Now let's add in speed. Processed foods are engineered to digest and absorb extremely quickly. This ensures a fast spike in blood sugar, dopamine, and other neurochemicals. And the faster the spike, the stronger the brain imprint. But here's the trick. That same speed means a faster crash too. And that crash creates discomfort, physically and emotionally. What do we do with discomfort? We eat again. This isn't a design flaw, it's intentional. Food companies know that a fast high followed by a fast low is the best way to keep you coming back over and over again. Now, here's where it gets even more personal. One of the most powerful strategies the food industry uses isn't even in the food itself, it's in the marketing. Think about what you've been shown your whole life. Food as love, food as freedom, food as reward, food as stress relief. Ads don't just sell ingredients, they sell feelings. They pair images of processed foods with memories and longings and comfort and connection and safety. Your brain doesn't forget those associations. Over time, your nervous system learns to expect emotional relief from those foods, even if your actual experience is guilt, fatigue, or emotional crash. This process has a name. It's called classical conditioning, and it wires your brain to crave processed foods whenever you're feeling vulnerable, because they've been packaged with emotional meaning. So what does this all mean? It means your emotional responses are not just shaped by your past, they're being manipulated by your environment. If you feel stressed, tired, lonely, or overwhelmed, your brain doesn't just reach for food randomly. It reaches for what it's been trained to associate with relief. But instead of actual relief, what you get is a chemical roller coaster that mimics stress, magnifies distress, and deepens your dependence. It's not personal, it's business, and it's working exactly as designed. Let's slow this down and turn inward. Think about a food commercial that stuck with you. Maybe something from childhood or something you've seen recently. What emotion did it connect to? Joy? Safety? Love? Have you ever eaten that food hoping it would give you that feeling? And did it deliver? Or did it leave you still wanting something more? This isn't about blame, it's about awareness, because awareness is the beginning of freedom. And this is the start of reclaiming your emotional landscape, one moment, one insight at a time. In the next section of the video, we're going to take all of this one step deeper and talk about why none of this is your fault, not the cravings, not the stress, not the cycle you've been caught in. Understanding the science doesn't just bring clarity, it opens the door to self-compassion. Let's keep going. Let's pause here and take in something that often feels hard to believe at first, but it's absolutely true. You are not to blame for what's been happening. You are not broken, you're not weak, you're not failing. You've been living in an environment that was designed quite literally to override your natural instincts, and your brain has been doing exactly what it was wired to do in order to survive. This isn't about willpower. It's not about discipline. This is about neurobiology. And when we understand the biology and the manipulation behind processed food, things start to make a lot more sense. Here's how your brain is designed to function. It seeks pleasure through dopamine. It avoids discomfort, including the discomfort of withdrawal, and it repeats whatever worked last time through habit loops and reinforcement. That's it. That's the system. Processed foods exploit all of those instincts. They stimulate your pleasure centers, temporarily numb your anxiety, and create a chemical pattern that your brain begins to interpret as necessary for survival. So when you find yourself emotionally eating, you're not doing something wrong. You're relying on a biologically learned coping strategy, one that made sense given what your brain was up against. And that deserves compassion, not criticism. But here's the problem. Most people don't know this science. So instead, they feel shame. And shame tells a very different story. That you're being weak, that you lacked motivation or control, that you chose to spiral even when you knew better. But none of that is true. What's actually happening is that you were navigating a powerful neurochemical storm and doing the best you could with the tools you had. You may have been in withdrawal. You may have been emotionally flooded. You may have been following a pattern your brain thought was protective. That's not failure. That's physiology. And the more shame you carry, the harder it is to reach for support. Shame silences us. It isolates us. It keeps us from healing. But when we bring in compassion and we pair it with science, something opens up. A path forward becomes visible. And it's not paved with judgment. It's paved with understanding. Recovery doesn't mean fixing yourself. It means seeing the full picture of what's been happening and choosing little by little to meet your needs in new ways. It means understanding what happened and why, learning tools and skills that actually work for your brain and your body, creating safety, structure, and support so your nervous system can settle without reaching for a chemical fix. And here's the beautiful truth. You're already doing the hardest part. You're here. You're learning. You're facing this with honesty and hope. And that takes real courage. Let's try something gentle but powerful. Complete the following sentence a few different ways. My cravings made sense when, fill in the blank. My stress response made sense because my brain was trying to help me by. You're not making excuses. You're telling the full story. The one that includes your biology, your environment, and your survival instincts. This is the kind of story that builds compassion, the kind that allows healing to begin. You are not the problem. You've been living in a problem, an environment designed to keep you stuck. And now you're doing something extraordinary. You're learning to step out of it. In the final section of our video this week, we'll talk about how to move forward one step at a time with awareness, compassion, and support. So you've just learned a lot about stress, about food, about your brain, about the ways the world around you has shaped your responses, and about how none of it is your fault. So what comes next? This isn't a moment to feel bad about the past or rush to change everything overnight. This is a moment to pause, breathe, and gently move forward with clarity, compassion, and support. The truth is, Your recovery doesn't begin with a dramatic shift. It begins with awareness, and that awareness has already started. Every time you learn something new about how your brain works, you take back a piece of your power. You're no longer stuck in the dark, wondering why your cravings hit so hard. You're learning to notice the difference between real hunger and chemical craving. You're becoming aware of how your food choices affect your emotions, not just your body. And that awareness, it changes everything. It moves you out of shame and into clarity, where real choices can begin. Self-compassion isn't fluff. It's not something you sprinkle on top when everything is going well. It's a real neurobiological tool that helps you calm your nervous system and reduce cravings at the root. When you speak to yourself with gentleness, especially when you're struggling, your body relaxes. Your brain stops scanning for threats. You come back to center. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love, someone who's in pain or grieving or going through withdrawal. That voice of kindness, it literally helps your brain build new pathways. It creates safety, and with safety, healing becomes possible. Another powerful tool that we use is called parts work. A way of gently noticing that different parts of us show up during times of stress, uncertainty, or change. You might have a part that says, you need to get this perfect or it's not worth doing. Or another part that panics, we're not safe, we need food now. And still another part that feels shut down or defeated that says, what's the point? We've failed before. These are not flaws, they're responses, adaptations that were formed to protect you or help you survive hard moments in your past. When we meet these parts with curiosity instead of criticism, something shifts. They stop fighting for control. They start to trust you, the real you, that you can listen and respond with care. That's what healing looks like. You don't have to silence the parts of you that panic, avoid, or resist. You just have to start noticing them gently and offering them a little understanding. Parts work doesn't mean analyzing yourself. It means being in relationship with yourself, with kindness and patience. You don't have to figure this out alone. In fact, you're not meant to. Healing happens in community, in spaces where people understand the biology, the pain, the path forward, where you're not shamed for struggling, but supported for trying. Whether you're taking tiny steps or big ones, what matters most is this: you are not doing it alone. Let's finish this week with a gentle reflection. Choose one of the following prompts and spend a few minutes journaling your answer just for you. No pressure, no performance, just honesty. One way I used to think food would help me was, now that I know the science, I can see that what was really happening was, I don't have to blame myself anymore for, the next time I feel that stress spike, I want to try. Recovery doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with understanding, and you've already taken the first step. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying curious. This work you're doing, this slow, courageous, informed recovery, it matters. You're not just learning to eat differently, you're learning to live differently. And that changes everything. I'll see you next week.